Uh, in attendance, we have, in the order that it shows on my screen, Assistant Corporation Counsel Brian Candela. We have Geraldo Williams. We have Tony Lopez. We have Mickey Colazar. We have Lori Tarano. And Nora, I'm going to screw up your last name, but we have Nora.
Happy to be here by first name.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome all. I appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Next, do we have approval of the minutes, a motion to approve the minutes from June?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from June.
All right, July, stand corrected, July, sorry.
Okay. All right, I'm not going to make the motion for July, though, only June. No, just kidding. I make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You could just raise your hands. Any, if any opposed, speak now. Abstain? Motion carries.
Michael, before we go on, I just want to say that I didn't receive any voicemails. I was in the office this morning. I didn't receive any voicemails prior to when I left, and I've received no emails concerning any of the items on the agenda for this evening.
And just to confirm, are we live on YouTube or that channel now? IT guy? We'll go with yes.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are we live on YouTube or is this live now?
Not on YouTube, but yes, it is live.
Okay, and being recorded. Thank you. Excellent. So then really, since there's no public participation, we can jump into the old business, which is updating you on how the ordinance committee went and then reviewing this final section of 32.4.
Right. So, so thank you to Tony and Michael, who appeared at the ordinance committee meeting on Tuesday.
I was there. I'm sorry. Just to correct the record, I was not there.
Oh, Tony, I'm sorry. I thought you were there. You've been at like the last four, so.
Right.
I just assume that you're there now.
Right.
Michael was there, and 32.8 prohibited gifts was approved and sent to Common Council, and Common Council approved it on Tuesday. So I guess it was a week ago, and then Tuesday it was approved by Common Council. So that is going to be, I'm going to have to submit a clean version of the language that was approved, and that's going to be submitted to the city code. So the only remaining section that needs to be revised now is 32.4, which is conflicts of interest, which is the one that they discussed on Tuesday, and is now back before you all, before it goes back onto the agenda at the September ordinance committee meeting. So let me see if I can give you a brief summary of what happened here. Hold on. I just have to find it again.
While Brian's looking, the overall, the meeting went well. They had some benign grammatical things to point out, which was no big deal. And then they liked the content. They more or less just want to see it restructured. What I found when we present these section by section is that they often take it out of the context of the whole document. So one of the initial feedback we received is this was too vague or didn't cover some areas they thought it should cover, you know, in more specificity. And yet when we went through this section and pointed out different paragraphs and then related to other parts of the code itself, they realized that it did cover it. They were just, you know, zeroing in on one section without taking the rest of the document into context. So then it was just putting things more up front for them to see it easier to read and understand. And if Brian, you found what you're looking for, you may proceed.
Thank you. So they indicated specifically 32.4A, prohibited transactions and transactions. They wanted, there's a, where is it? In, I'm trying to find it. Bear with me one second. All right. So in 32.4A5, towards the end of the last sentence in that, it says a conflict of interest exists whenever an officer or employee will more likely than not benefit disproportionately from other citizens of the city, directly or indirectly, from a decision over which they have influence. So one of the comments that the ordinance committee made is that they want that definition in quote, because conflict of interest is not defined in 32.3, which is the definitional section. They wanted this summary or explanation of what a conflict of interest sounds like at the beginning of 32.4, not buried in 32.4A5. So they want to move up that sentence. It sounds like they wanted to do it either after a municipal employee or officer shall at 32.4A and before subsection 1, or prior to a municipal officer or employee shall. So that's one of the first things they wanted to deal with.
Let's take this,
Yeah.
Brian, section by section, or
Sure.
or a comment by comment. So, does anybody have opposing thoughts or additional thoughts related to taking? I was comfortable with it if they wanted to see that up front. Does anybody have additional thoughts about taking that last sentence of 32.4A5 that says a conflict of interest exists whenever an officer or employee will more likely than not benefit disproportionately from other citizens of the city, directly or indirectly from a decision over which they have influence? Is there any other feedback, or are we good to move that up top? All right.
Fine.
I'll take silence as complicity. I like it. A note for those that are watching this recording back, people are agreeing. Brian, go to the next part.
Sure. So just so you know, what I did was, I moved up, before we get to the next part, I moved up a conflict of, so basically it starts with 32.4, conflicts of interest, and that's the main thing. And then it has A, prohibited actions and transactions. And then before it gets into a municipal or employee or officer shall, and it starts enumerates all the problems that could occur. We moved up, I just moved up that language, a conflict of interest exists. And so that's the precursor to all of these, a municipal employee or officer shall not, and then it lists these things. So based on what I heard from them on Tuesday night, and then from you guys, well, them on Tuesday, whatever day it was last week, and from you guys right here, I'm going to make that change, and then I'll move on to the next one unless someone disagrees with that point.
So I'm sorry. So where are you moving? Just show where I'm looking
Sure.
at the.
32.4A5.
Yep, I see
And
that.
then the
Going
last
to the top. I see that's the first part that we discussed.
Yes.
Right. So you see, Tony, where it's under 32.4A, it says prohibited actions and
Yep.
transactions.
Yep.
Okay. And you see underneath that it says a municipal employee or officer shall.
Yep. I
So
see it.
we're inserting that a conflict of interest exists in between those two.
A conflict. Okay.
So it's
Got it.
kind of like an explanation of what a conflict of interest is. And then the next part is, okay, and an employer or an officer shall not, and then it enumerates all of these things that they shall not do to avoid a conflict of interest.
Okay, but where does 5 fit into that? Where it says avoid engaging in any business transaction and so forth?
Sure. So 5 still has language. 5, the shall not for 5 is avoid engaging in any business or transaction or having a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly, which is in material conflict with or incompatible with the proper discharge of his or her official duties, or that by creating a divided loyalty might influence or impair his or her independence of judgment and action in the performance of said duties.
Right, but that's what
So
we're moving up.
that's-
I just want to understand the order. We're bringing up 5 to where and where after?
No.
So-
We're just the last sentence of 32.4A5. Just that last sentence, a conflict of interest, is what
See
we're
where it
moving
says a
to the
conflict
top.
of interest
Okay,
exists?
got it.
So we're just taking that last sentence and moving up top because they viewed it as a definition or an explanation of what a conflict of interest is.
Yep, I got it.
All right.
Two
Yep, go ahead.
things.
Go ahead,
with
Nora.
that. One is, should we just then move all of section B up so that section B becomes A, and then a municipal employee or officer shall becomes B? Because that definition of what a conflict of interest is would then make
Yep.
sense with the following part of what they should
So
do.
you must have been listening to the meeting.
It was not.
must- No,
my-
it's funny you mentioned that because the next thing that they were talking about specifically was changing the order of A and B.
Yeah.
They felt that because of moving up that conflict of interest section prior to the shall nots, that B made more sense to jump A, just as you mentioned. So that's the next thing.
Well,
So-
Brian, let me interject real
Yeah.
quick.
Yes.
This just made me think to change what I had said about going item by item.
Yeah.
Why don't we hit the bullet points of what the changes they want?
Sure.
People make notes of your feedback,
Yep.
and then we will go back line item by line item. So don't worry about getting confused by right now.
Yes.
But this way, to
Yeah.
how Nora just pointed that out, it
Yep.
might already be covered. And
Correct.
so-
Okay. That's a good point. So obviously the first one we already discussed, and the second one Nora correctly pointed out. So specifically, when we go back through this piece by piece, the ordinance committee felt that they had a difficult time understanding 32(4)(a)(5) and A6. So in that shall not paragraph, A5 and A6, they had problems with. They thought it was too vague and the language needed to be tightened up. And then,
Can I ask a question, Brian?
yes.
Brian, is there any way for you to pop that up on the screen so we can
I was
see it?
gonna, I have it, but it's gonna, he goes over it.
I mean, I'm looking
don't
at
know how
it
to-
here, but it's,
Hold
I don't
on,
know how to do
I'll
that.
be able to do that in a second.
Okay.
and then you can use the cursor to kind of point to, the
You're
areas that
right.
you're talking.
That's a good idea, Lori. That's what I was gonna suggest. You're right on target. I was hoping you could point to it like with a
Hold
cursor or
on,
whatever.
bear with me 1 sec. I'll be able
It's
to
funny,
do it.
I just did that because I'm on my cell phone with Zoom, but I'm on my computer with the code.
All right, if you guys, can you see, which screen are you seeing?
I see the
Excellent,
beginning of the
yeah.
agenda, Michael.
All right, perfect. So I'm scrolling down.
Yeah, we just scroll down. Yeah.
All right, good. No, I have two screens, so I wanted to make sure you're seeing the right one. All right, so this is 32.4, 5, and 6. It doesn't highlight because it's a PDF, but this is what we're discussing right now.
It highlights. What do you mean? It's,
No, it's in blue. I'm saying I can't highlight it on my screen.
oh, okay.
So 32.5, the language I just read to you, 32.4A5 is the language I read to you minus that a conflict of interest exists because we moved that up. They believe that this A5 is vague and they didn't really understand it and they wanted us to work on the language. And the same thing with A6, which is talking about not deliberate or participate in a decision or action by the agency which the individual is a member of. So they're talking about a situation where somebody's making a decision about an agency or a department that they have some kind of connection with that could impact their ability to make an unbiased and objective decision. That's to me what that paragraph is discussing.
I'm scrolling out so
Yeah.
we could see the bottom of 6 as well.
Sure. And then there was one other minor thing that they raised when you guys are ready.
For me, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. So in 32.4 subsection C, number 3, it starts with a contract or transaction.
Here,
Yeah.
Okay. It's the last part of it. And I know they had an issue with making a written disclosure, which is the last sentence. It's discussing where appropriate and in accordance with the Code of Ethics, the officer or employee should make a written disclosure of the transaction to the city clerk. So they had an issue with the written disclosure. For the life of me, I can't remember. What the issue was with the written disclosure, but they did identify an issue about making a written disclosure.
And Brian, I'm just noticing in section 2 above, it also talks about a written disclosure, which
Yeah.
that was already in the code.
Exactly.
We were just adding it in 3 to be consistent.
With 2.
Right.
Yep. So I
Is
think it
there,
might,
go
yeah,
ahead.
No, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, I'm thinking out loud because I also they didn't belabor this point.
They really didn't.
There was some cause for pause about having to do it in writing as opposed to, verbally or something of that sort, but it doesn't stand out in my head.
No, it doesn't. I'm just, let me read the 3
But
again.
can I ask a question?
Here.
Lori, go ahead, or Nora, which one of you?
Okay, sure. So if, because some of these other things that have come up elsewhere in the code, we, ask if somebody needs clarification or they want to inform, get an acknowledgement that this has been disclosed. It's made to us, to the commission.
Yep.
An advisory opinion?
Yeah, exactly. So wouldn't that negate the need to record anything with the city clerk? Is that really?
So
relevant
Lori,
to-
that was the point that I was making to them when we were discussing 32A about the shall nots. Michael and I were both making the point that the Board of Ethics, you can't enumerate, you can't legislate every single scenario, number one, and number two, because of that situation, that is why we have the advisory opinion that somebody can reach out and ask for something, and I advise them that it's been used, and the Board of Ethics is very quick in responding. It's we don't have to have a formal meeting in order to get a response from people, to at least give the person a general idea as to whether they're walking off a branch that's a little too weak. We can certainly provide information and guidance informally, and then let them know that they should wait for the next meeting to get a formal advisory opinion. To that end, it didn't convince the ordinance committee that we shouldn't tighten up the language and make it more specific. But that was the specific argument that Michael and I made at the meeting on the Tuesday that we went in front of ordinance. But yes, the advisory opinion would be a way for an employer and officer to get the blessing of the Board of Ethics or be warned saying you can't do what you're about to do. Yes. So those were the issues. So I don't know what we already did the first one. I don't know, Michael, if we should just go back through A5 and A6 and see if there's language that we can agree upon that we think might be an improvement, or do we want to talk about moving subsection B up in front of after conflict of interest and before A? I don't know.
Let's do, I think this will be easier initially, is let's move subsection B, which is the conflicts of interest. Let's talk about making this section A. It's essentially all we're going to do is just change the order.
Right.
And note the purple highlights. In the event of an officer we're capitalizing, employee capitalizing of the city has a known conflict of interest, we put in, he or she shall disclose it in writing to their supervisor, and the supervisor shall file the written disclosure statement with the city clerk. If such conflict is material, the officer or employee with declared conflict shall recuse him or herself from taking any action with regard to the city related to the conflicting transaction, business, or interest, including but not limited to participating in discussions, meetings, or votes involving the conflict of interest, except as otherwise provided herein. Now, what I would actually, thinking out loud, where we say herein, I would put something that says reference subsection C, because no longer is subsection C directly following this statement. So the herein might be confusing if subsection A, which will, to be confusing now, be B, goes next. Although that might fit too if it's prohibited. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had the opportunity, unlike you all, I had the opportunity to think about this probably a lot more than you guys did. So if everyone is in agreement, at least on the order in which these things go before we get into the nuts and bolts of the language, if we do move up B, which is identified as conflicts of interest, and move it up to A, I still think the sentence that we moved up first, a conflict of interest exists, kind of like the informal definition, should go in front of what was in subsection B, which is in the event an officer or employee of the city has a known conflict of interest. So I can read it if it makes it easier, and at least what I have, and then you guys can have a discussion about it. So, Michael, subsection B currently, that subsection B with that paragraph would move up to A. So conflicts of interest would become A instead of B. And if you go to A5, the last sentence in A5, which says a conflict of interest exists, that would also move up into subsection A, and it would go in front of that paragraph. So I'll read it. Conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest exists whenever an officer or employee will more likely than not benefit disproportionately from other citizens of the city, directly or indirectly, from a decision over which they have influence. In the event an officer or employee of the city has a known conflict of interest, he or she shall disclose it in writing to their supervisor, and the supervisor shall file the written disclosure statement with the city clerk. If such conflict is material, the officer or employee with the declared conflict shall recuse himself or herself from taking any action with regard to the city relating to the conflicting transaction, business or interest, including but not limited to participating in discussions, meetings, or votes involving the conflict of interest, except as otherwise provided, and Michael's recommended language, instead of herein, to as except as otherwise provided in subsection C, which is the exceptions to you're allowed to continue to do that.
That flows, Brian.
Say that again, Tony?
I said that flows
well.
Yeah.
Contextually it flows.
I'm just gonna step away for a second while you guys are discussing it real quick. I have to go get a charger for my phone, otherwise my iPhone's gonna die.
Yep, take your time. Does anybody have an objection to that specifically, changing that B to A and how he just read it? Nope. All right, excellent. So we'll do that. While he's getting his charger, let's look over the language in 5 initially, and then ultimately 5 and 6, to see if I know we're comfortable with it, but see if re-looking at it with fresh eyes, if there's any tweaks we want to make it more specific, if you will, or if we're comfortable presenting this again in the way is. Brian, we agreed to move B to A.
Okay.
We had discussed.
Which part of 5 that you just made reference to, Michael?
So it's everything except the last sentence. So avoid engaging in any business or transaction or having a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly, which is in material conflict with or incompatible with the proper discharge of his or her official duties, or that by creating a divided loyalty might influence or impair his or her independence of judgment and action in the performance of said duties. So that would be 5. And also, just to bring this back in conflict, these are prohibited actions and transactions. So this is what we're telling, a municipal employee or officer shall not take. This is where sometimes when you just look at one paragraph and you take it out of context of the whole section, you know, part of what I think happened when they were reading this is they'd read section 5, but not read 1 through 4 and combine it. So they didn't think it was specific enough. And I think if we point that out more and harp back on that, they'll see it. Yet with looking at it at fresh eyes, if you have alternate thoughts, now's a great time to go
I
over.
thought
Nora,
it's,
go ahead. Oh, sorry.
but 1, 2, 3, 4 all start out with not and then a verb. And here we're starting out with avoid engaging. Why didn't we say not, you know, because
Shall not engage.
yeah, shall not engage. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a good comment.
Yeah. Good point.
You birdied that hole, Mickey.
Yes. Because if you say avoid, that doesn't, avoid is not the same as not. So
Means get away with.
yeah.
Because also 6 does start with not deliberate, so that's good. Not. Yep, 7 and 8 are
That's
also.
consistent. Yeah.
Yep. Good catch.
I wonder if part of the, I'm just trying to think if there's any, I guess immediate family is a defined term and that's why it's capitalized. I'm just trying to think if there's any way we can simplify this because it
Right.
is a mouthful, but immediate family is a defined term. So that's why it's capitalized.
Yes.
I was wondering if there's a way we can maybe break it into 2 sentences or give 2.
Well, I mean, there's almost. I think you're onto something, Nora, because I think there's. I mean, it's one thought, but it could be 2. I mean, so not engage in any business or transaction or having a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly, which is material conflict or incompatible with the proper discharge of his or her official duties. Period.
And then so that's 1, and then the second one would be a divided loyalty might influence or impair his or her. So
Yeah, but I feel like the divided loyalty and the material conflict go to more together. I feel like the harder, the part that's more confusing is the avoid engaging in any business or transactions or have a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly. That's just a lot of words before you get what the problem is. Because I do feel like we want the material conflict and the divided loyalty together because it is that you cannot have a material conflict or be incompatible or have a divided loyalty. So maybe the or is part of the problem, which is immaterial conflicts with, comma, incompatible with, comma, or creates a divided loyalty.
Comma.
is the confusing part the proper discharge of his or her official duties? I know it's not confusing as reading the sentence, but just adding that extra mouthful as we do, as the last sentence here, it impairs his or her independence, like we are redundant in some of that.
Yeah, right. Do we need the incompatible or maybe material conflict and divided loyalty are sufficient? Because really what would incompatible be that wasn't one or the other of those 2 things? I think you might be right, Michael. That might be part of the problem.
So just end it at official duties.
Well,
And then
No, I would take that out and I would keep material conflict and divided loyalty. Because those are the 2, like either it's a direct conflict or you're torn, right?
But that divided loyalty is influence, isn't it?
Right. That's why I'm saying I think it might be. That's why I'm saying I think it's important to keep that one. I think the incompatible with proper discharge of his or her official duties might be the redundant part. Because what would that be that wasn't either a material conflict or something that created divided loyalty?
But I would say the same about divided loyalty. That word divided loyalty is redundant when you say influence because that's the whole point of what it would do is influence. Why repeat with divided loyalty? If that's the ultimate effect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's another redundancy, is what, like you're
Yeah.
pointing out.
So I'm gonna try to write this down because it gets confusing when.
Well, Michael, I can write it for you. If you guys talk it out to me, I'll type it up because I have a Word document up here. I'm trying to make the amendments as we go through them.
So
Okay.
I mean, maybe-
I think some of the redundant verbiage. I know Nora's pointing one out, and as she was talking, I couldn't help but notice also the
Yeah.
divided loyalty verbiage
Mhm.
is the same as influence. That's influence.
But my question is, do we even need anything after discharge of his or her official duties? I mean, like the whole rest of that, it's an effect, it's an outcome of
Right.
the conflict of interest, but it's implied. I don't think.
You're right. The divided loyalty is a result of the material conflict or the fact that it's incompatible with the proper discharge of your duties.
Yeah, so
But-
we don't
but
really
the
need
effect,
any
like-
of that, I don't think.
But like the effect, like Laurie just said, is the influence, isn't it? We don't have to say what else it could create, like divided loyalty. It influences.
Right.
It's a
And I
byproduct
think
of it.
I think to Tony's point, in terms of being clear with what people should avoid, I think that incompatible with proper discharge of his or her official duties is not a particularly clear, like if you're trying to understand what you should or shouldn't do. I do agree with Tony that influence or impair his or her independence of judgment and action is probably the most concrete in terms of like, what are you trying to avoid?
So
doing.
not engage in any business or transaction or having a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly, which is in material conflict with or might influence or impair his or her independence of judgment and action with the proper discharge of his or her official duties, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah, because influence is already there.
And
Right.
the divided loyalty thing, that's subjective.
Right. Exactly.
right,
Exactly.
All right, so let me hold on one second because
Do you say
All right,
that again?
so-
I wrote the paragraph over and now I can amend it so we can all see what you're writing.
all right, so not engage in any business or transaction or having a personal, immediate, family, or business interest directly or indirectly, which is in material conflict with or impairs his or her independence of judgment and action with the proper discharge of his or her official duties.
Wait a minute. What did we do there?
Just one correction at the very beginning.
Yep.
We talked about shall not engage in any business or transaction or have a personal or immediate family business. I think
you're
that's
So so do not engage in any business or transaction.
Or have a personal, immediate family or business interest, directly or indirectly, which is in material conflict with or impairs.
Hold on. Sorry, I'm slow.
Yep.
I'm not used to being.
That's okay. Let me know when you're ready.
Do not engage in any business or transaction or have a personal, immediate family or business interest directly or indirectly.
Which is in material conflict
Yep.
with or impairs
Yep.
his or her independence of judgment and action
Yep.
with the proper discharge of his or her official duties. I believe that's it.
Would it be with or in the proper
In.
discharge?
Well,
in.
when you can you
Yeah.
add influence and impair?
Yeah.
Is it in or, yeah, you're right. That's a good question.
I think
In.
it's in.
In? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you want, so when we're done with the meeting, I will send everyone a new copy of it in Word format, and I will highlight in yellow the things that have been changed. And so you'll have the one that we've been working on, which is the email that was sent to you, the agenda, plus it's on the city website. And then I will send you this Word document where you can see the changes that were made because it'll be in bold and yellow.
So Brian, one more time. And,
Sure, I'll read it.
Where,
I'll read it.
where it says,
I'll read
not
it slow.
engage in any business or transaction or having personal, immediate, or family business interests directly or indirectly. And then that's where we go.
Which is
right
in material conflict with or
with
impairs. Yep.
or impairs. So I'm
His or
just
her
saying.
Yep. Which
What I'm
impairs.
saying is before we get to impair,
Yeah.
before we get to impair,
Yeah.
should we not add the influence part, that one word?
I agree. I was
Like
gonna
influence and impair, because there's two different things. I know it's split. It looks like we're splitting hairs, but
All right, so is it, which is in material conflict with, comma, influences or impairs?
yeah, maybe, yeah. Influences and or impairs.
And or, all right, let me read that one more time to you guys. Not engage in any business or transaction or have a personal, immediate family or business interest, directly or indirectly, and here's the part that's been changed the most, which is in material conflict with, influences, and or impairs his or her independence of judgment and action in the proper discharge of his or her official duties, period.
Bingo. I think that's it.
one tiny thing. It should be
Yep.
that which
Which, where?
that is in material conflict.
So that is in material conflict, not which.
Right. Just
That is
grammatic.
in material conflict. Okay.
Agree.
Yeah.
So is everyone okay with that language? Do we move on to A6 or do we have more changes?
I'm okay with it.
I'm
It's
okay.
good. I'm good.
All right. All right. So A6, it was a similar, so they were saying that it's a little vague. They didn't really provide more guidance other than they wanted it to be more specific. So in my feeling, I don't know I don't know how we can get more specific with these shall nots without getting into like hypothetical situations. So I think the maybe the idea here is to do what we did with A5 and just try to tighten the language a little bit. If we can.
So what is it? Well, let me see if I can get a grasp of this.
All right,
Yeah.
everybody take a minute to read through.
Yeah, let's read it. Yeah.
Moment of silence is okay.
Can I ask a question? Did we, elsewhere in the code, because I just can't remember. So we're saying here that you can't participate in any decision or action by the agency which the individual is a member or employed if such individual or any member of their family, immediate family, has any interest in the matter or would benefit. But didn't we say someplace elsewhere that, you know, if something like that arose, that you could, if it was disclosed and approved? You know what I mean? Because I can think of situations where, you know, like an employee might have a family member who is the only person, you know, like their business is the only business that could fix an infrastructure, like a water main break or something like that. It's the only company in the area that can do it, and it happens to be a family member.
Right.
Maybe they, you know, it's disclosed and they've gotten an exception, you know, but, you know, so it wouldn't be deliberate to participate without explicit, you know, like written approval from the city that this is okay, you know, but they have to, they have a duty to disclose it. They can't participate in it unless it's been approved. And, you know, because that might even be just too prohibitive, unless, I thought we had something elsewhere that they could get an exception, but if that's not the case, then I think we might want to, I'm not trying to change this thing, but I do think that we want to give ourselves the, like, they have to come to the city, they have to come to the Board of Ethics, they have to disclose it. And
Well,
That's
that's where
fair.
this
Right.
conflict of interest things comes in.
Yeah, city
Uh,
clerk.
yeah,
the-
but if you're saying you
the-
can't do it, you know what I mean? Like, it's like that to me looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that paragraph that we're just looking at now looks like, period, you can't do it.
Well, no, it would otherwise be provided by law if they did the written disclosure in the conflict of interest
So,
section.
so
I-
Lori, this is exactly what happened when we were discussing it with the ordinance committee. Is you're correct? If only we had section 6 where it says you can't, that's one thing. But to your point, we do have it in the same section, which would now be section A, where it says he or she shall disclose it in writing to their supervisor, etc. Written disclosure statement with the city clerk if the conflict is material. And go ahead.
Can't we label that B disclosure so it could easily be spotted? Disclosure of conflicts of interest.
But, okay, then let me ask one other question, not to just
Go
tack
ahead.
on here, but then do we even need it? Because if it's covered here as it is, then are we confusing everybody by saying you can't do it over here? Just take it out if it's, already said that, you're required to have to disclose it and get it approved. Then do we even need that?
I would ask, what is the impact? All we're saying is that they can't participate in the decision-making of some issue related to that involves their family member. So would it impact the city, unless you're saying that was the only person that could make that decision, or is it concerned that that person may have something to contribute that could help the city?
There's always an exception to every rule is my thinking. So, while it looks like this should be a no-brainer that, oh, if my family member is involved, then I shouldn't be, as an employee of the city, I shouldn't be involved with this at all. There could be some bizarre thing that comes up and you want to give an ability to grant an appropriate approval for a specific situation. But if we're looking, if we're saying someplace else that you have to disclose it, but then we subsequently say you can't do it, I don't know. Do we want to soften this a little bit, take it out altogether, strip it down a little bit or rework it?
We could say, unless otherwise provided by law.
Well, there's no law against it. You know what I mean? It just doesn't pass the smell test, so there's no law against me hiring my family member,
I guess
Nepotism.
unless otherwise provided by 32(4)(a). Because then you're going back up and saying it has to be a material conflict that you have to disclose to your supervisor.
And it has to be disclosed and approved beforehand, before you engage in the behavior or, make the commitment. It's got to be, vetted first.
But I'm still seeing this as they're saying you shall not deliberate or participate in the decision. So it's not something where this individual would be, most likely it's not that they're not the only person engaged in that decision making. So the fact that they have to recuse themselves, what would be the impact to the city? As opposed to the employee, in one case it's prohibiting this from appearing to be a conflict of interest or a biased decision. If they recuse themselves, it removes that. I'm assuming there are other people engaged in that decision making. So at least allows the process to go through without any appearance of some bias or the conflict of interest.
Okay.
Lori, let me ask you this. Is outside of section 6, if we look at section 7 and 8, for example, it says not by virtue of his or her office or position of employment with the city, grant any special consideration, treatment, or advantage to any person beyond that which is generally available to public. And then the same in section 8, not by virtue of his or her office or position of employment with the city, receive any special consideration, treatment, or advantage in any activity or business transaction beyond that which is generally available to the public or officers or employees of the city. So there seems to me in all of these, and this goes up to 1 through 4 as well, a consistency about this is what they're not supposed to do, except where we provide those vague loopholes, if you will. because we can't cover every instance, but we have to spell it out, you know, and break it down. And, you know, you would like to think you don't have to say not provide a financial benefit to a third party, you know, but there are some things that we just have to over point out. And yet where there is the exceptions that you're speaking of, we provide that by saying, you know, you could write a written disclosure or get an advisory opinion from the board in different sections to allow that.
Okay,
So,
then is it, oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
no, so I was just going to say, before we just belabor section 6, is it's, if you take the whole paragraph or that 32.4, what will be B, if you take that all in context, 6 fits in with 1 through 8.
Yeah, I see your point. But then maybe the appropriate place is to just, let's kind of proceed this. So before we go into thou shalt not, we're moving up the other section. We're moving up.
Right. So what we're moving up as section B right here is going to go to A, conflicts of interest, and then A will become B, a municipal employee or officer shall not take any action, not have a role.
Then maybe it's shall, you know, like right there when we say municipal employer officer, because I don't want somebody down the road, like let's picture when none of us are on the commission anymore and there's no memory of what the thought was behind this when it was written. It would be, because it looks like, okay, if you have a conflict, you get approval, but then after the thou shalt nots come, and so it kind of looks like maybe you can't get an exception for that. So maybe we just, is it appropriate to say here where municipal employer officers shall not, unless, you know, unless approved by the city in writing, you know, unless prior approval is received in advance, a municipal employer officer shall not.
Yeah, so maybe just to jump on what you're saying, Lori, something to the effect like, unless a municipal officer or employee has received an advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics or received some kind of thing from in the paragraph above 32.4a, then the employer shall not.
Yes, exactly.
Regarding that advisory opinion, is that somewhere here that I'm not seeing already? Yeah. So can
so advisory opinion, let me find it for you, Tony.
I just want to tell you guys, it's, I don't know where, if it's raining hard where you are, but it's raining hard where I am, and my Wi-Fi's been really unstable, so if I lose you, that's what happens.
So we won't take it personal, Lori.
So all I'm suggesting is that perhaps that we, kind of like what Lori is saying, but if we could insert the exception by referencing that section on that you're looking for, Brian.
I'm having trouble hearing Tony.
I'm sorry?
So advisory opinions is found in 2 different sections, but really the section that matters is 32.12 subsection C, powers and duties. C1 talks about advisory opinions. The Board of Ethics, when requested to do so in writing by any officer, employee, agency, or upon its own motion, may render advisory opinions concerning officers, employees, and other issues with respect to this code of ethics. Such advisory opinion shall be binding on the Board of Ethics until amended or revoked, and reliance on controlling advisory opinion in good faith is an absolute defense in any action or proceeding brought under the provision of this code of ethics. And then it goes on to, you know, how quickly you render the decision. But basically what it's saying is that if an agency officer or employee asks for an advisory opinion and it's given an advisory opinion, and then they follow that opinion in good faith, and somebody tries to file a complaint, an ethics complaint against that person following this advice, for lack of a better word, it sounds like immunity, quite honestly.
But is what we should be referencing the advisory opinion, or is what we should be referencing section C, which are the exceptions on the basis of which we would grant an advisory opinion that the behavior was acceptable? I mean, should the language just say shall not except as provided below, or at least herein, or in section C?
Yeah, so section C says subsections A and B of this. So really it should be subsection B of this section does not prohibit the following, because A is just kind of talking, well, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys, where it says exceptions, subsections A and B of this section do not prohibit the following, and then it lists what you're allowed to do. So is it A and B, or is it just B now?
I think it's still A and B. I just meant to Lori's point, if given what Lori's concerned
Right.
about, is should what is now B reference that section C does contain exceptions,
Right.
and that it's clear from reading it that that you have to read the whole thing in total.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. That if we could include that thought so that it's not lost either. We should be able to reference, like, refer to this section, right?
I just think it's gotta be like if somebody's looking something up, they should be able to go right there and understand that I have to have permission. If these situations exist, I need to get an opinion first. And it might be possible, it probably isn't, but I have to ask. I have to disclose it. I have a duty to disclose. It's got to be clear, because if down the road an employee challenges this, like, oh, I didn't understand that. I mean,
Right.
people here, but we need to,
Well, this is also, keep in mind, there's two components to this document, and I apologize for being redundant, but there's a citizen's guide that we spell out for lack of a better term, lay folks, for the citizen, that this is, outside of the legal minutia. This is how it's in English, but we have this breakdown of this legal minutia because it is a somewhat legal document, and that's why it's redundant. That's why it uses legalese in the Board of Ethics itself. And yes, I don't have issue with referencing it, but I'm gonna scroll out just a little, but if we take 32.4 as a whole, and for somebody trying to reference and read, you're going to read 32.4, conflicts of interest, interference with duties. Okay, this is the section I'd need to see if I have a conflict of interest. So then you're going to read through, and I know it's out of order right now, but you're going to read through A, a municipal employer officer shall, and then it'll go through not do this, not do that, etc. Then you're going to see, in this case, I know B and A are reversed, but B, conflict of interest. And it's going to show you what a conflict of interest is. And, okay, but you can get a written disclosure statement with the city clerk, etc. And then it's going to go, oh, C, exceptions. Does my situation fit under these exceptions that, I can purchase a sale, foreclosure, blah, 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 if the transaction is according to public procedures. And so my point is that if you take the section as a whole and you're reading through, certainly if you just read 32.4 as it's listed now, A1, it doesn't bring the whole document into context. So if somebody wants to say, well, I just read 32.4 A1 and realized, oh, it didn't apply to me, I can go for it. My counter would be, well, but if you actually read through to the next section right under, it's there. So that the thing I want to be careful about as we parse individual paragraphs or bullet points is that if you take the document as a whole, it might be there. And if we need to make it more clear, to Lori's point or some of your other points, I'm all for, referencing that section or pointing it out, but it is there when you take it in whole. Does that seem to fit or make sense?
Oh, yeah, sure. I couldn't agree with you more. I do think that for me, though, like, it would just benefit us to consider. Can we scroll up a little bit, Michael? Just
Yeah.
Okay, right to there, to the A, like to municipal employer officer shall, we say shall. We might be able to say shall not, unless, prior approval by, prior advisory, opinion, shall not, and then we can take out the nots in front of all the stuff, and then it would actually flow a little better, my opinion, just because then we don't have to have not there. It would start with a verb, take any action, have a role, take any action directly or indirectly, like down to 3, down to 4, provide a financial benefit. So you can say at the beginning, a municipal employer officer shall not unless, you know, prior.
Notwithstanding, I agree, Laurie. So to take Laurie's step to the next level, I agree with her. Maybe we could tweak that, like she said, municipal employee officers shall not, and then in parentheses, notwithstanding section blah, blah, blah on conflicts of interest.
Or shall not, on prior advisory, you know, opinion has been rendered, granting an exception, you know, and it's just very clear. You can't do it unless you have a, you know, approval first, period. And here are some of the things that you absolutely can't do. So
is it, I'll just piggyback on what Lori's saying. So is it something to the effect like, unless a municipal officer employee meets one of the requirements in subsection C below or receives an advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics, he or she shall not, and then you list them all or whatever.
exactly.
That sounds like what you're saying. I don't know.
Yeah, that works. I think that works. But I think it's like, because people are just going to go.
But hold on, can I?
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna. I want to point this out. I'm certainly happy to defer and go with that. But the way we flipped it around by putting conflicts of interest as A, the first thing people are going to read is, in the event an officer or employee of the city has a known conflict of interest, he or she shall disclose it in writing to their supervisor, and the supervisor shall file a written disclosure with the city clerk. If such conflict is material, the officer or employee with declared conflict shall recuse himself or herself from taking any action with regard to the city related to the conflicting transaction, business, or interest, including but not limited to participating in discussions, meetings, or votes involving the conflicting interest, except as otherwise provided herein subsection C. That'll be the first thing they read, and then it'll go to prohibited actions. A municipal employee or officer shall, you could go with not and then take any action and all that, but you don't have to then necessarily repeat subsection C because we just did it in the preceding paragraph.
Yeah, no, I wasn't looking for us to repeat that. I was just looking to us in that header to just say, you know, shall not unless, you know, previously approved, you know.
But the thing is too, I don't know that we want to really highlight that. I mean, this should be, I mean, the situation where they get an advisory opinion that allows them to operate with a conflict of interest should be so rare. Like, I'm not sure that we need to make it sound as if there are exceptions being handed out. The advisory opinion section exists. And if someone, you know, really genuinely thinks they have some reason that qualifies, but I honestly can't think of a conflict of interest that would pass muster with this board to not recuse yourself. We're not saying that people have to remove themselves from the agency, but I cannot think of what a conflict of interest directly in the transaction that we would say was ethical. So I don't know that we want to be highlighting that possibility.
But I just think this is a document that's got to have a long shelf life. And I think you can never say never. I agree with you. It should be rare and never happen. But to me, this looks confusing and it looks contradictory, because on the face of it, it says, unless we have an exception, but then we're going down to, these things look absolutely ironclad, you know, prohibited, like forget it. Like, don't even ask if this is the situation, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, it's like so I just think if we're even going to have these situations identified in here, that we make it clear. I think it's just for clarity. That's it. You know, I think you're right. But if I'm not a lawyer and I'm an employee or whatever, you know, I might use this wrong. I might, you know, I just think it's just a little enhancement that would help, you know, make it.
I'm okay with referencing the exceptions again. I am actually not comfortable with referencing the advisory opinion, because I think that implies that it's something that is would be a regular occurrence. The advisory opinions exist for a reason, but they largely exist to clarify that the situation does not involve a conflict of interest. I don't know that we would issue an advisory opinion in a situation where there was a conflict of interest.
I also believe if you're dependent on the Board of Ethics to make advisory opinions on transactions that are, you know, part of your, you know, daily activity or way of doing business, will cause us to be a bottleneck in that process. I think if you're saying that you're going to prevent this person from participating in that decision-making process, it's not like they're the only individual in the city. is really saying the city, we are removing this conflict of interest, this issue that causes people to wonder if there was some bias in the decision or some favor why they were participating. So I'm not inclined to be flexible on that.
But we're not saying that we are being flexible. We're just saying that you can't do it unless you have permission, period. So, you know, so in the reality of this, when somebody comes and they've got a situation, they can ask and hear no, you know, and we would expect that they're going to hear no. But I think it's just a matter of saying, look, this is the process. If a situation arises and you want to, you know, like, you know, one of these things is, you know, happening, you're going to have to ask for permission. And, you know, it's up to the board to grant it or not, you know, and then the likelihood that it's going to be approved is probably zero. But there is a mechanism for that rare situation where, you know, this is the only company that can fix our computer system, and it happens to be the cousin of an employee who works in IT, you know.
But we're not saying that they can't, by the way, we're not saying that they can't fix it. We're just saying that this individual can't participate in the decision making. So the other people in the organization will go ahead and approve that only person, that gem that we need.
Right,
and then there's no bias because the person who is their relative didn't participate in the decision making.
But it's not just decision making. We're also saying a financial benefit to a third party, take any action directly or indirectly. You know, I mean, like, so it's not just about the decision to hire an outside contractor. This is broader than that. So it could be any, you know, like it could cover other situations too. But if my cousin's firm is hired and I work in the same department, that, you know, somebody on the outside perceive that as a conflict. But I haven't. You know,
but if you weren't the person that approved it, there's not a conflict because we are showing right here. Then you removed yourself from that decision making. It's approved. This can still be approved because it's then proven that that person is the best person for this, and you recused yourself, so it's clean. There's no conflict there.
Maybe this is the middle ground between the two sides here. So after you go to B, prohibited action and transactions, I was just working on this language while you guys were talking about it. Let me know if this is agreeable. Unless otherwise provided in section 32.4, which is this section, comma, a municipal employee or officer shall not. So it's telling you you can't do it unless somewhere else in this section it says that you can, and that other section is subsection C, or if you get some kind of blessing from your supervisor, which is in 32.4A. I don't know if that works for everybody. It's kind of a middle of the road approach between the two.
Yeah, it works for me.
But I don't know where the supervisor gets that power from, though. We're not going to authorize a supervisor to approve conflict of interest. I wouldn't.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean the supervisor. The supervisor is just going to file the written disclosure with the city clerk. So basically it's unless otherwise provided in 32.4. And so that section would be 32.4C, which says those are the exceptions to the situation with a conflict of interest. So it's advising people that there are exceptions later on, but it's also highlighting that if you don't meet one of those exceptions, you're going to be stuck under that. So it notifies people like Lori's trying to do, but it also tells people like Nora's saying that this is very, very limited.
Read it one more time, Brian.
Sure. Unless otherwise provided in section 32.4, comma, a municipal employee or officer shall not. I put the not up there and I made it all verbs underneath in 1 through 8.
Okay, so at this time, do we have, I don't know that we need a motion to approve those changes, but do we have agreement amongst the ranks to go with the way Brian just listed the changes?
Yeah, absolutely for me.
Great.
Sweet. Yep. Next. Thank you all. That was great interaction and dialogue.
Thank you, everybody.
I have another change on 6.
Yep.
I don't know why the portion about the city's ordinance list employees is there in 6 instead of the exceptions under C.
It's a good point.
Well, Brian can tell you why they're there.
Well, I'm sure. I'm sorry. I understand why they are there. Why they are there in that particular place as opposed to C. I wondered.
So basically, you're recommending just taking city's ordinance list employees from city's ordinance list may participate in any municipal contract negotiations or grievance procedure, and just move that down to the exceptions and remove that from subsection 6.
Yep.
Does anyone have a problem with that?
Nope.
All right, so I deleted that. I'm just going to make it, this will be number 9.
Yep, that's fine.
All right, so let me just see how, whoops. Let me just see how this sounds here.
Question while you're working on that, Brian, is
Yes.
is 6 entirely duplicative of what is now section A?
Hold on one second. City's ordinance list employees may represent the city's interests in any municipal labor contract negotiation or grievance procedure, period. All right, so I'm going to highlight that in yellow. We can come back to that one. All right, so A6 you're saying, Nora?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about why the ordinance committee might have found this confusing, because I actually don't think the language is nearly as confusing as some of the others, but I'm wondering if it is because it is essentially duplicative of the conflict of interest standard in general.
It sounds very similar to what's in now the second paragraph of A.
Right.
Does.
Well, actually, it sounds, hold on a minute. Actually, it sounds like the first paragraph in A, that they're more likely to benefit disproportionately than other citizens of the city because of their position.
Right. I mean, I feel like it actually is saying the same thing as A in just very slightly different language, which might be confusing. And that might be why the ordinance committee was confused by it. I feel like it might be totally duplicative of the conflict of interest provision in general.
Yeah.
Or if we're going to keep it, then the language should be exactly the same as in the conflict of interest.
I think it's helpful to leave because I think when you're looking at either officers, employees that are, I mean, quite honestly, candidly, are not going to be very familiar with this. Some of them don't even know that this code exists. I feel like if they're looking for an answer and they're worried about it, they're going to go, okay, is there a shall not? Is there an exception? And so they're going to immediately go to B and C. They might just bypass A or look at the definition and kind of throw their hands up and say, all right, where are they going to tell me that I can do this thing or not do this thing? So it might be helpful, even though it is a little duplicative, but I agree with you. We could probably change the language a little bit to make it more in line.
Nope, that makes total sense to me as to why you'd have it in both places, but then I would just make the language exactly mirroring. So, participate in discussions, meeting or votes, just so that it's exactly the same definition, again, and the disproportionately from other citizens of the city, et cetera. Or not deliberate or participate in any decision or action where there is a conflict of interest, so that, again, it refers back up to that definition.
Right. Yeah, because, so maybe deliberate or participate, like you said, deliberate or participate in any decision or action by the agency.
The thing that we have to be careful of while you work through that, Brian, Nora, is follow me on this. If you look at 7, the difference is here it talks about grant any special consideration, in 7, treatment or advantage, which is generally available, not beyond that's generally available to the public. And 6, really the only difference between 6 and 7 is likely to gain or lose any benefit that is not common to the general interest of the public. So even in 6 and 7, their intent.
Yeah, fair point, Michael. What I can tell you is that what was made pretty clear is that the ordinance committee wants this to be more specific in terms of, they want more guidance, like what Lori's been saying about, we need to know what we can and can't do. And so I think I'm going to backtrack completely on this after what Michael said, because it kind of triggered my memory. I kind of feel like 6 should remain, but maybe we can make the language a little bit clearer. You know, like we have the general conflict of interest definition up top, and then we have these 7 or 8, I think it might be 8 specific shall nots to try and give some guidance, and then we give some exceptions because we can't legislate everything. And so I think it's important because, like Michael said, you have 7 and 8 are still referencing, well, you're being treated differently because of your status with the city. And this one's talking about, well, you're being treated differently because of financial benefit because of your status with the city. So it probably has to remain.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the language should just be as parallel as possible,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't appear that it's somehow some different additional
Right.
definition. I think that was the potential source of confusion for the ordinance committee. Because
Yep.
I agree. I mean, it's sort of mirroring 5. Don't do the transaction, or don't be on the business side of it. Don't be on the city side of it. Like, it makes sense why it's there. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me know if anyone has a suggestion as to how they would like to switch this language.
Just a quickie thing, maybe somebody can answer. Why would it be a conflict of interest for you or a family member to do something, or you to do something, and somebody lost the benefit? Why do we have or lose any benefit? Why is it or lose in there?
Fair enough. It's like the hearsay exception about why would you say something that's detrimental to yourself unless it was true.
Yeah. It seems to me it would be likely to gain any benefit. The whole point of the paragraph.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could
an upper hand on somebody.
You could imagine some sort of situation where someone was being punitive. I would, that would be.
Here, let me throw this random idea out there, and I haven't thought this through, so forgive me if it doesn't make any sense. Is if a police officer in an investigation found out information and was married to somebody that was in, I don't know, the school system, and or pick another profession, but they didn't get a promotion based on confidential information that was found out in a police investigation, and they lost a benefit because of that, a raise, a promotion, not a public, somebody didn't get arrested, somebody didn't get in trouble, but through a confidential police investigation, somebody lost the benefit of a promotion or something of that nature. Does that seem to be enough reason to lose the benefit, or does that just not make sense?
Well, to me, it doesn't make any sense, but maybe somebody else.
I don't know if what you're trying to get at, Michael, is like a misuse of confidential information or information that should have stayed confidential. Maybe, could certainly, they could be, damaging somebody's reputation. And that, that's a real thing that happens because people kind of talk among themselves, and that could be, there should be a consequence for that. If as a city employee, I'm privy to information, that doesn't mean I can go home and tell my spouse who also works for the city, and then somebody doesn't get a promotion, or somebody gets fired, or there's, rumors floating around or something, you know what I mean? Like I think there could be a reason that needs to be addressed.
Because to me, Mickey, the key is that next sentence is that is not common to the general interest of the public. So if there's not common information out there, and it's to their detriment, somebody utilizes that information to their detriment, to me, that's where I agree with you that at face value, the whole idea of this is to not gain an advantage, to not utilize a position to a benefit or an advantage. Yet that can, in even fewer cases, work opposite. And so that's why I think it's there, although it wouldn't be, might be 99.5 to a half if ever used. We can also agree to disagree, and I'm happy to defer to others.
I apologize. Will there still be quorum if I go put my daughter to sleep?
Yes,
have
there, by all means, go ahead, Nora. There is quorum. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you,
That's-
Nora.
Pleasant
Well,
dreams.
Bye, Nora.
Yeah.
He's adorable.
Um,
Tony, Geraldo, Lori, Brian, you guys want to take a stab? And
Yeah. To be honest, I didn't see it in.
I mean, to your point on losing any benefit, I mean, I don't, the context here is that if there's anything to be gained, as it says there, that's not
Actually-
common. So I don't know that losing any benefit is relevant.
Actually, Tony, let me interject. Mickey, I had a thought. What if it was a spiteful thing? I'm mad at my brother. I serve on, whatever commission that oversees him, and I choose to be spiteful so that he loses a benefit. And I can't think of a great example, but say a city carding contract. I serve on DPW. My brother owns city carding, and I say, I want city carding to no longer be the garbage pickup for the city of Norwalk. We should vote them out, or we should reduce their fee or something. And of course I'd have to recuse myself. And yet that would be a family member or a cousin if I chose to not, usually we think of this, that family tries to help each other, but there are family fractions where people actually want to, adversely affect a family member. Does that-
What can like that?
I saw the issue. I saw the issue with A5 that they were raising. I don't understand the confusion about the line. I've read it about 5 or 6 times now. I don't see the confusion with the language in A6. It's basically saying you can't participate or deliberate if you or your family member has an interest, and you would either likely gain or lose that benefit, which is not common to the general interest of the public. I don't see why that. I don't see why that is vague or why that's problematic. I think it's pretty clear, but.
Yeah, I agree, but for 6, I don't even know. I mean, like, a family member, but I can see this being used, like using information that you have to harm somebody else
You don't
for
like-
your own advantage, or, it's like another employee, you're sabotaging them, or your, spouse works in personnel and tells you something that they shouldn't have, and you use that in your department to gain advantage or to put somebody else down. And, I mean, it's a misuse of confidential information. And so it could impact anybody. It could be another city employee. It could be, but I think that the thing that I would want to see coming across loudly and clearly is you can't misuse confidential information, period. And not for gain, not for loss, not for any, I don't even know if we need to spell that out. It's just, you cannot, disseminate confidential information, like at the hospital.
So, Lori, just to jump in, 32.7B says, unless otherwise required by federal, state, or local law, an officer or employee shall not disclose confidential city information other than in accordance with established city procedures or with the appropriate authorization from the city.
Right.
And then C says, an officer or employee shall not use to his or her advantage any confidential city information for the purposes of advancing his or her financial or personal interest, or the interest of their employer, or the interest of a member of his or her immediate family.
And maybe that covers it, and we don't even need that. The other section that we were just in. Because it's redundant because we're saying it, but.
And just to jump in again, 32.9 under specific violations. Violation of confidentiality, it shall be a violation of the ethics code for any officer, employee, or agency to intentionally violate any confidentiality requirement provided for under the ethics code.
Where are you reading from?
it's not on this page. I
It's
just
not
have
on this page, Tony. I'm sorry. It's in. when people are bringing up stuff that I know is in different sections, I have the other code sections up. I'm using a Control F find search term, and I'm just trying to find it quick.
So can you go back to the where we were before?
Yeah.
Sure, hold on. This?
No, I had a thought about that one.
You're talking about A6, Tony?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
Can we qualify and say has any interest in the matter or would be likely to gain or lose any benefit, and then comes the thought as a result of any dissemination of confidential information as described in whatever section you just finished quoting.
Well, I think these are totally different things we're talking about, because this has to do with a decision or action by an agency. We're not talking about disclosure of anything. We're just talking about that has to do with deliberating or participating in a decision or action of an agency.
Right. So I think Mickey's right. This is talking about somebody making a decision when they have some kind of conflict where they're trying to use something to their advantage or somebody they like's advantage, so like their family member. And we're protected in that it's not needed here because we're basically saying that it's just almost like a strict liability claim that if you violate confidentiality without approval from the city, that it's a violation of the code of ethics, and it's prohibited under a different section, 32.7. So conflict of interest talks about when you have divided loyalty, but even if you don't have divided loyalty and you're trying to disclose confidential information to try and hurt somebody, whoever it might be, or to your advantage, it's not only could it be possibly covered under 32.4 because it might be a conflict of interest because you have information that other people don't, but it's also in two other sections where it says you shall not do that, and in one of them it basically says that it is it's a violation of the code of ethics. It's almost like a strict liability claim. So I think we're covered there.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I believe we're really parsing this section 6 above what it needs to be parsed, in that everything that we've been coming up with is addressed in a different part of the code, so that this does, if we want to tweak the language, which we already took out the last section of the paragraph and put it on its own, we can tweak the language. But I do believe when we went through this, there was a reason this was here and put in the format it was, and that the things now that we're belaboring or coming up with, we're finding are in other sections because we're not looking at the document as a whole. So I would say let's spend another 2-3 minutes and then come to a resolution so we can move forward. Is that good with everybody?
That's fine with me. I mean, I'll start first while you guys look at it one more time. I've looked at this, I don't know how many times since that meeting. A6, I don't get it. I think it's pretty clear, especially when we moved that last sentence out.
But didn't you say that they wanted something more clear?
Well,
They're saying it's vague. They're saying it's vague. I don't know how we can. I'll why don't you guys take a look at it and see if you can come up with something. As at this one, I kind of got writer's block on A6. I think it's fine, but.
What did they say? Did they specify?
No, they basically just said A5 and A6 were vague.
Right, and let the record show that the next time we present this to them and we articulate it better, and I'll take responsibility for that, is that they didn't not approve it because of section 6.
Right.
There was a passing comment that they felt 5 and 6 were vague, but then we didn't go in. We just, what our group right here just had a 10, 15, 20-minute conversation on it. We spent 30 seconds on it in the ordinance committee meeting.
Right.
So if we were to actually engage, I believe they'd see the merits of this section and be okay. So again, if there's tweaks or adjustments we want to make, I'm not standing in the way. I'm opening it to the floor. I don't want us to spend another 20 minutes when, if we explain it to them better, and again, I was on the Zoom call, if you will, for the ordinance committee, and I'll take responsibility for not doing a good enough job of explaining it in the moment. But I don't think that this would be the hang up of all. They had other things where they had greater hang ups. And I think by switching things that we've switched, it'll address those. And then by explaining this subsection 6 or 6 better, I don't see this being the hang up.
I would leave it as is. Well, except for dropping off that last sentence and making that number 9.
Right.
Are you good with that, Tony?
Yep, I am.
Geraldo?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Lori?
And I can even think of examples where that would be required. So
Okay, so
I think it's good.
Brian, we'll leave subsection 6 the way it is, minus the last sentence.
Right. So I'm just going to highlight that last part so we know that it's at the bottom. It's actually at the bottom. I'll read you the language and then we can go to the since it's linked to this last one we just did. So C9 is new. And C9 is what we just deleted out of A6. And so it says that it's an exception is city's ordinance list employees may represent the city's interests in any municipal labor contract negotiation or grievance procedure, period. That's it. And that's an exception that allows the city ordinance list people to do those two things and it not being a conflict of interest.
And I think by doing that, that'll provide their clarity that they were looking for by
Yes.
separating the two.
And the last one that they talked about was C3, and Michael correctly pointed out that C2 also has it about making a written disclosure. For the life of me, I cannot remember. Again, the thing they really focused on was the order and that they wanted the current A, which is now B, to be more specific. So I think we've done those things. When they talked about A5 and A6 being vague, they were very brief about it. And when they talked about C3, about this written disclosure, they didn't spend a lot of time on it either. So for the life of me, I can't remember why they had an issue with should make a written disclosure.
Well, and also, as I pointed out earlier, and this again, I'll take responsibility because I was in the ordinance committee meeting and we didn't get into this, is while they were looking at subsection 3 and they were wondering why we added it there after the fact, I believe we added it because we wanted to be consistent with subsection 2, but that did not come up in the conversation. So it is quite possible that if we reference that reasoning similar to subsection 1, disclosed in writing, that they might just sign off on it. It didn't come up. They looked at subsection 3, on its own. They asked the question. It doesn't mean we have to scramble and undo it. Although if you guys see reason or a cause for pause, by all means, take a moment and then speak up.
I don't.
I don't.
And if it wasn't a big thing with them, when is the next time this is going back before them?
September 15th, third Tuesday of September.
Do we have any other sections that we've really got to cover that were bigger issues with them?
No, this is the last section. Everything else has been gone through Board of Ethics and gone through Ordinance Committee and have been approved by Common Council. This is the last section. Once it's approved, we can finalize the Citizens Guide.
And celebrate.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the agenda, we just have listed an executive session. Do we really have an executive session?
No, we're about to be done.
Okay, good. All right.
That's our goal. Yeah, no, this is.
Okay.
And to keep us going.
All right, so I'll read it once and then we'll go from there. C subsection 3, a contract or transaction between an officer or employee and the city, which contract or transaction does not involve his or her agency and is available to the general public through open bidding or other process, where appropriate and in accordance with this code of ethics, the officer or employee should make written disclosure of the transaction to the city clerk. And that language mimics the language in section 2, which was already in the code.
One quick question, should or shall?
Good question.
Should sounds like, yeah, you ought to do it, but I don't have to.
Yeah. Should gives you an option out. You should do it, but you don't have to do it.
I think we're talking about, I don't think this happens very often, but where it does happen, if you're asking me, I would say shall.
Same here.
Shall.
I think should gives you an option that you don't have to do it. You just should do it.
I'm not disputing that. I'm going to just take a moment and read section 1 where it says disclosed in writing, 2 where it says disclosed in writing, and 4. And I just want to see that we have consistency so that it doesn't have a random loophole that we're not seeing.
In
It said
agreement.
should in 2.
Yeah, it should be should. I mean, should be shall.
That's a tongue twister.
You're gonna drive me crazy, Mike. Your speed.
Oh, sorry. Here's a really silly, terrible thing to ask. Why have we added that it needs to be a written disclosure using number 3, where a contract or transaction between an officer or employee in a city which contract or transaction does not involve his or her agency and is available to the general public through an open, if it doesn't have to do with his or her agency, and similar in section 2, it covers if you go to the middle right here, employee must take no part in the transaction on behalf of the city, and an independent officer or agency must approve the terms of the transaction in writing.
So
Why are we adding?
Why you're saying instead of adding it to 3, we should be deleting it from 2?
That's, yes, I'm posing the question. That
Right.
just stood out to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
So just take a second to.
So what are you proposing, Mike? I missed it.
So we take out this blue part of 3. We take it out, the written part.
Yeah.
And then in section 2, the last sentence, we take out that same thing, where appropriate and in accordance. And if you take those out and read section 2 and stop at writing, stop here.
Yeah.
I think it fits. And the same with 3.
Okay.
Without adding the written part. So read through that and we'll reconvene in a sec.
Okay.
Yeah. I see that. Take it out.
What I like? What's that? Is that a sentence? The first part of 2?
A purchase, sale, foreclosure, or condemnation of property or any interest therein involving the city and an officer or employee of the city if the transaction is conducted according to the applicable public procedures.
So what is that?
Except
Well, what it's saying, mind you, it starts with the beginning. So subsections A and B of this section do not prohibit the following. You're allowed to purchase, sale, or foreclose or
Got you.
condemn. So that's where it's leading
Got you.
into that.
Okay, subsection.
So why isn't it a purchase, sale, foreclosure, or condemnation of property or any interest therein involving the city and an officer or employee of the city if the transaction is conducted according to applicable public procedures and the officer or employee must take no part in the transaction on behalf of the city, take no part in the transaction, period? Or do you keep on going and say, on behalf of the city and an independent officer and agency must approve the terms of the transaction in writing, period, and then just end it there? So just get rid of the last sentence.
That's what I thought. That's what I was in agreement with.
Yeah.
The last sentence.
Yeah, we're talking about
That's what he
taking out
said.
everything after in writing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Purchase. Yeah.
So if we take that out from 2 and then take the blue part out from 3, they're in line with one another.
Yep.
Because after rereading it, I didn't see it adding a value.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so in 3, we're taking out the language after process, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay, and then that's good. Just real quick, read over 1. I just see it says disclosed in writing to the city clerk. I think that was fine, but let's just read that over while we're here. And then I think we're about done unless Brian has something else. So read section 1 over.
Officer. Is available.
It looked fine to me.
Yeah.
Well, just
So would you get rid of after contract, Michael? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I just wanted to read it through. Go ahead, Mickey.
Well, I was just going to say, we talk about officer and employee, and all of a sudden we say employee and officer. So that last one should just be swapped.
Yep,
To keep-
I'll make that change.
Not a big deal.
Officer or employees. Got it.
And not, I'm good. Are we all in favor of the changes we just proposed in 1, 2, and 3? Any additional comments?
No.
I'm in
I'm in
favor.
favor.
Good.
Excellent.
Okay.
Perfect. Brian, we got that. Is there anything
Great.
else last to touch on?
No, those are the only, bear with me 1 second. My phone, I gotta charge my computer. It's gonna turn off.
Yep, take
No.
this.
I
While
didn't
Brian's,
have anything else. Those were the only things that I remember them mentioning.
all right, Lori, Geraldo, Mickey, Tony, thank you guys very much. Appreciate your extended stay this evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Stay safe, stay healthy. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah, you definitely do.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Geraldo seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Brian, thank you very much. Everybody stay safe
Thank
and
you.
healthy.
Good night, everybody.
safe.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Meeting
Thanks,
adjourned.
everybody.
See y'all. Take care. Be
Stay
safe,
safe.
all.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye.
Be safe,
Yeah,
everybody.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.